We know from some of the excerpts that we have now received, and we've received obtained a copy of this book that we are going through as we speak right now, that Steve Bannon refers to that meeting at Trump Tower in June of 2016 as having been not just treasonous, but unpatriotic, is the way he describes it, among other things. We're also looking through some of the quotes, this one specifically from page 255 of that book, Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House, where Steve Bannon discusses whether or not President Trump was aware of the fact that his son, Don Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, then the campaign chairman, had been meeting with Russians at Trump Tower on a day that, according to our records, the president was at the White House. The meeting happened in the afternoon when we know the president had returned from a fundraiser. Steve Bannon, according to these excerpts, says simply that the chance that Don Jr. did not walk these Jumos, as he is quoted as saying, up to his father's office of the 26th floor is zero. In effect, saying there is no way that the president was unaware that this meeting was taking place under his nose, in effect, in his building at Trump Tower on that day. You'll remember that the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, said that the president was only aware of that meeting earlier this summer. That's after we first learned the details of the president putting out that statement, or helping contribute to a statement that his son Don Jr. put out, saying that the meeting really focused on Russian adoption and not about anything further than that. So this is significant, and that it gives us yet another window into what is believable about what have happened back then. We have reached out not just to the president's attorneys today here at the White House and outside, but also to those representing some of the other members of the inner circle, including Jared Kushner, who is said to have been in that meeting on that day. When I'm done speaking to you, we'll reach out to Don Jr.'s attorney as well to see if they have any comment on this as well. Stephanie?
I'm still shaking my head at the word. I'm not even going to say it again. I can't even believe these words. Mark, I turn to you, though. Steve Bannon making these kind of accusations, whether or not they're true, what does this mean for the Robert and Rebecca Mercers of the world, massive supporters of President Trump and 100% financial backers of Steve Bannon? Is Steve Bannon not creating a war between himself and the White House?
Yeah, Stephanie, I do think that this could end up creating an entire rift inside the entire conservative movement, not just with the Mercers, but also with Breitbart, the news organization that has been saying that this has been a phony witch hunt from the beginning on this Russia investigation. And, you know, it really has been the conservative base, those kind of organs, that have really helped protect the president and his White House during this Russia investigation. We've seen the attacks going up against Robert Mueller, the special counsel. We've seen Capitol Hill really come to the president's aid when it comes to the Republican side. But all of a sudden, if now is this rift, and the longer it goes on that Steve Bannon doesn't knock down these quotes, I do think that you're going to end up having a conservative movement that is kind of frayed right now when it comes to the Russia investigation. And certainly, again, the crux of all of this is that everyone who's been saying that there's there when it comes to this Russia investigation, well, now Steve Bannon is joining those people.
Well, if Steve Bannon is telling the truth here, can't he carefully thread the needle that'll make the argument he's wanted to make all along, going after these White House globalists? Because what he's pointing to is money laundering. Money laundering that has to do with the Trump businesses, that has to do with the Kushners' ties to Deutsche Bank. And remember, Deutsche Bank is also tied to the Bank of Cyprus, as I mentioned earlier, to Wilbur Ross. These are all people who are not allies of Steve Bannon in the White House. Remember, Steve Bannon, he doesn't like that faction of the White House. And, you know, you've got the Gary Cohns, the Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross was part of the campaign, but Gary Cohn wasn't. Steve Bannon could be successful here in saying, me, the nationalist faction of the White House, I'm true to who I was, and I always was. But Jared Kushner cared about his business and his money, as did Don Jr. If Steve Bannon can create this line, and if he's correct, wouldn't that be a huge win for him?
I think, as you're alluding to, Steve Bannon has always been more about the cause rather than the individual, and that is President Trump. And, you know, the cause is a populist type of White House, and the more that policy that is coming from the White House isn't all that populist, it does seem that you could have the motivation for Steve Bannon to say, look, I was against this right from the beginning. But let me go back to what Peter was talking about that June 9th, 2016 meeting at Trump Tower, why that is so significant. We already know that you ended up having a meeting with a Kremlin-connected lawyer. But, Stephanie, we know now of multiple interactions that the Trump team ended up having with Russians or their intermediaries. And whether it was that June 9th meeting, whether it was Don Jr. And his direct messages over Twitter with WikiLeaks, or George Papadopoulos and his own interactions abroad, there are now multiple points where Trump campaign or campaign officials were interacting with Russians. And going back to the campaigns that I've covered since 2004, Stephanie, that just doesn't happen. A normal presidential campaign isn't dealing or talking or interacting with a foreign government, particularly a foreign government that has an adversarial relationship with the United States.
Peter, if Steve Bannon seems to have this definitive information or smoking guns, wouldn't he be lawyered up and speaking to Robert Mueller and his team? Why would he be sharing this with the general public?
It's a good question, a question that a lot of people want to pose to Steve Bannon right now. As you pose that, let me read you some of the other details. And even as you're speaking to Mark, I'm going through some of the excerpts as provided to us for broadcast by the publisher of this new book, Fire and Fury, by Michael Wolff. If you'll indulge me, it says in part on one of the pages, during the flight home from Hamburg, Germany, this is back in July of this year, when the president and his family were composing that response, as we were just talking about, to the New York Times report of Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians. The president's lawyer then, Mark Kazowitz, was kept waiting on the phone for an hour and then not put through. It adds on a later page, the spokesperson for the president's legal team, a man by the name of Mark Corallo, believed that the statement about Don Jr.'s meeting, largely directed by the president with the participation of Kushner, Hope Hicks, and a Kushner spokesperson, represented a likely obstruction of justice. Corallo, as the book notes, resigned shortly thereafter, refusing to continue to work with the president and his family. That's specifically from page 260. Another call that we need to make when we're done is we're just getting these excerpts to Mark Corallo, no longer serving on behalf of this president or his legal team, to confirm the authenticity of those comments, that that's the way that he viewed events as well. But just more details, obviously, right now that added new layers to that meeting that took place now, June of 2016, a year and a half ago, and obviously you're still making waves this much later.
All right, boys, I'm on TV, so I can't tell. Take me to Twitter. We know that the president has been en fuego in the last 24 hours. Since these quotes have come out, has the president or Don Jr., who's also a big fan of the Twitter, have they said anything on the social media platform?
Not to my knowledge,
I've been talking,
Stephanie.
so I haven't been looking.
Mark?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. And yeah, yesterday, the president of the United States sent off 16 tweets. Today, he has been relatively silent, at least compared to yesterday. And we'll be checking that Twitter feed throughout the day.
All right, I think we have Ken Dilanian joining. Wait, but before we go to Ken, quick, Peter, as you're feverishly reading through these quotes, I've got to ask, is there a White House press briefing today? Will you have a chance to ask Sarah Huckabee Sanders any questions? Because until now, President Trump, I don't believe, has ever uttered a negative word about Steve Bannon.
You know, we haven't had a chance. Well, he has been critical of Steve Bannon before. Remember, he sort of dismissed him at one point. But generally, he's very complimentary of Steve Bannon. These two men obviously have a pretty similar worldview on a lot of topics and speak regularly as it's described to us. There is a press briefing today, I believe, scheduled to happen at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock today with Sarah Sanders. So we look forward to posing those questions to her today. My colleague Kristen Welker and I were upstairs trying to get some reaction from the White House earlier when they were behind closed doors holding some private meetings, which it's likely you can believe was focused on how they do respond to this right now. But, you know, Stephanie, that's what we know at this moment. Literally, as you're speaking to me right now, I'm getting handed more and more excerpts as our team rifles through this book.
All right, quick then, before we go, Ken Dilanian, throughout the last hour, more excerpts of the book have come out. Do you have any new reaction?
Well, I've always believed that it's very likely that Donald Trump Sr. would have known about that Trump Tower meeting. We are going back to the Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya today to get her reaction to this notion from Steve Bannon that they took this group upstairs to see Donald Trump Sr. She has always represented to us that didn't happen, and we're going back through the transcripts to see exactly what she said about that. But that would be a really interesting development if, in fact, these people met, obviously, Donald Trump Sr. after that Trump Tower meeting.
Stunning. It will be stunning to see how conservative media responds to all of this. Until today, it has been, this is all an overblown hoax. Now let's see what they have to say. Okie doke, gentlemen, thank you so much. NBC's Peter Alexander, Ken Dilanian, and Mark Murray, thank you. And thank you for watching this hour of Velsheen Rule. A lot happened. I'm Stephanie Rule. My partner, Allie, will be back with me next week. So tomorrow, you're going to have me all on my own again. And you can check us out on social media and connect with our show at #VelsheenRule. I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. Right now, I hand you to my friend Andrea Mitchell for Andrea Mitchell Reports.
And right now on Andrea Mitchell Reports, pushing buttons. President Trump inflaming nuclear tensions with a tweet, taunting the unpredictable leader in Pyongyang.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.